Well, one of the things I want to do, first of all, if you have questions, ask them anytime, and Ralph is fine, okay? The other thing is I definitely want to thank Lisa and Jared for putting on this program. We have been doing this now, I think we're in our 8th annual program, and we've done it at several different campuses, and we want to get out and meet and talk to more students. Now, I'll be going back and forth to change the slides. I probably should have put boundless spirits of ethics versus boundless spirit of ethics, but the thing that we're looking at is I'm going to look at ethics from a lot of different positions. I have worked as an administrator in graduate research. I've worked as a professor teaching students both in public health and our business school at Texas Tech University. So we're evolving, and we're seeing different kinds of ethics issues arise when we advise our students now. And what I want to do is cover the array of ethics that we're looking at, and then our role. And I will make some points about some of the things that we've done historically at Texas Tech University, and I'll also talk about some points about the damage that occurs when students or even faculty or staff are involved with misconduct. And what I want to do is start out, this building, Millennium Towers in Lubbock, Texas, and it's kind of a story that I want to share with you. I was doing business in this tower. As you can read, back in May 11th, 1970, the superstructure of this tower was twisted. And then the American Institute of Steel Construction and the National Science Foundation did a study of the building and said the building was sound. Even though it's twisted, you could continue to work in it. It's not a problem. It's not going to fall over. It's not going to hurt anybody. Well, one time, several years ago, I was doing business in this particular building, and I'd been there many times. And what had happened was, the fellow I was doing business with, we were 3 of us, said, "You know this building is twisted." So I said, "Okay, well, what does twisted mean?" So he took me to a corner of the building, well, took us, and showed us how we could tell that the building was twisted, okay? Well, you would think that having been in the building many times, that wouldn't have affected me mentally. So science says the building is good. My emotions start telling me the building is tilting, the building is leaning, the building's going to fall. Also tell me, oh, we're in trouble in this building. So we go back to his office to do business. I can't stop thinking about the building is twisted and going to fall over. Well, science says the building is okay, like I point out, but emotions are okay until you know. When you start knowing something is not quite where it should be, if it's askew and you know it, that little wheel in the mind just starts spinning. So we finally wind up having to move out of that building. I just couldn't sit there any longer. I said, look, I can't listen to this project because this building is twisted. Now before I could listen to anything. Okay, I mean, this is what it was. Well, this is the way ethics work with us, is that we, when we know something, it starts burning and it becomes a grit that kind of grinds us, the same way this science and emotion came together. Now, why this guy is telling, after going to the building at least 15 times, why he decided on this particular visit to tell me it was twisted, I'll never know. But what I do know is that I didn't want to be in a twisted building. Even though science is saying, oh, don't worry about it, it's not going to fall over, nobody's going to get hurt, you know, you're going to be safe. So when we're doing things, the capacity that affects our mind is what we're trying to do with our students when we give them advice or work with them, is that we're trying to get them to understand that in the long haul, short-term decisions may appear to be rational, but sometimes you have to take and be a little bit more analytic about what you decide and what you decide to do. And I try to do my darndest to get people to understand the importance of human social capital and how this works out for us and what its meaning and relevance is. A lot of students and faculty and staff are not looking at the long distance. They're not looking at the value added of getting a credential or being an advisor or being in the marketplace. So as social capital sets all of us up for several issues that are relevant to us. Trust, economics, reciprocity, cooperation, and market. So when we're working in our groups or in our teams or working with individuals that are outside our orbit of doing business, each one of those could be a problem for us because we feel like that when somebody does something for us and they ask us for a kindness back, reciprocity, we should be doing that. And sometimes we do it without examining what is being done and what the relevance is. And it's very important in our lives as advisors and as people that are engineering this next generation to try to get them to appreciate that they're transitioning into a world that is taking a different shape. Part of the reason it's taking a different shape is because of electronic media. Another part of the reason it's taking a different shape, we're using different tools. And we have to get them to, and so the market and trust, we have to take and start weighing the merits of what trust means. Does trust mean I shake your hand and you go do something and I've signed up for it? How do we start defining these social capital activities that in the past had been so very simple for us to work with and for us to grow and understand? They're shifting kind of, well, very much like sand in the desert. We don't realize that the sand blowing is creating another sand mountain someplace else because the change is so gradual. But at the same time, we've got to have alert professionals and alert students understanding that these shifts that are taking place can be very, very dynamic and also be very, very hazardous. Human capital is where we are as far as what is happening with our students, where we're getting them involved in the system. We're getting them to start thinking about the social capital. You're going to get out of here, your own campus, you're building social capital, you're building a network, you're building who you're going to work with in the future, you're building a methodology of who you're going to be in the future right here. And then there are people out in the marketplace. You have to look at this and think in terms of how do I continue to build my knowledge base? How do I continue to grow and expand without manufacturing a hazard for myself or for my organization? And this is the environment that we're working in today, is that it's so very simple via the different tools that we're using to actually, if we don't continue our training, continue our exposure in the marketplace, we can actually set ourselves up to do more harm than good. So it's very important that one of the things that we work with with students in our ethics center and with our different programs is you've got to keep learning, you've got to keep exploring, and you've got to keep understanding that things will be changing in your marketplace. And those of us that work as advisors, we really have to look at skills, knowledge, experience, and process and try to get the individuals to understand that they're joining a population out there that may not have the same interest in social capital as he or she may have. And this is very important for us to get a transition for. And we practice this, and we practice it in our daily lives. Now, these are some of the things that we look at in our academic integrity process. And I think all of us do. I think all of us are probably using student focus groups. The other thing that we may do to build community, development of a cross-discipline academic symposium. These things have been tremendously beneficial in our network, in working with our students, with our staff, as with our faculty. We've gone very far at Texas Tech in developing not only a methodology for a newsletter and getting information out to our students, but we also have developed a journal where when we do symposiums, we actually publish their papers in our e-journal. Okay? We spend a lot of time reaching out to all organizations, sororities and fraternities and social organizations. We have at Texas Tech adopted 7 ethical principles. And so when we do our programs in those organizations, we bring those ethical principles with us because, and we talk about them with the students, because those ethical principles are the foundation that our Board of Regents perceive as being assets, mutual respect, diversity. So we take and share those ideas with us and get students to discuss them, be it a social group, social organization, be it a fraternity or a sorority. And the fifth point is construct a social network for information distribution. And seventh, create a certificate recognition program. Students that go out and do service in the community, we let all the organizations know that if you send this information, if you're doing Habitat for the Humanities, or if you have an Adopt a Highway program, if you bring that back to us as a visual, we will post it on our Facebook, we'll post it on our website, and we will take and give you a certificate for your organization, so that we're acknowledging the work that they're doing in the community. And one of the things that we try to do constantly, thank you, is we try to be proactive, because in our situation, as in yours, thank you, as in yours, we're always hearing something from our students. We're always learning something from them, and we're having to make adjustments because which is good. The good news is they're sharing it. Sometimes we can't make all the adjustments we need to make, and whatever the problem is, but at least we know it, we can present it, and we can discuss it and try to seek remedy. The next point that we're going to go through is, and if you have any questions about some of the things that I've gone over so far, please do ask them. For those of you that have some familiarity with the law, these are pretty much legal terms for what most human resources dismissible, firing, termination principles are built on. Now, this is very important for us. This is a transition. Now the majority of our students are working either full-time or part-time. And part of the reason that they're motivated to do this now is that they don't want to graduate with $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 worth of debt. And if you're visiting with students, as I've done in the past, and well, I still do, students will come talk about their jobs or talk about what's going on in their particular activity, and they'll say, well, I'm a little bothered by this. Is there something wrong? Well, these are the kind of issues that usually come out as a result of being employed and trying to work your way through school. Having someone that's incompetent that you're working with, just total inaptitude. Misconduct. We've heard a lot about misconduct more recently with the hashtag activity. And then we move down to the other areas of misconduct. Malfeasance, wrongdoing, misconduct by a public or private official and the commission of an act that is illegal. That is illegal. The thing that comes to mind when you think about this kind of malfeasance, you would look at individuals that you're working with, or in organizations where you're working, where they're doing something with money. I guess one of the things would be taking somebody's money for a service and not completing a service and not following through on it. Some type of misrepresentation that's happening. And a lot of us in our profession, where we're advising and talking to students come in and say, you know, this happened on my job and it kind of bothered me. And you want to be able to say, well, look, that's out of my domain, but I suggest you go see the police chief, or I suggest you report this to somebody else in your organization, because it sounds serious enough that you need to be able to go to work in good conscience and feel like that you've done the right thing, as opposed to sitting here telling me about it and I'm unable to do anything. You're going to have to step up and do something. just to get clarity. And the way you step up to get clarity is not go in and say, oh, this guy is doing something that looks like malfeasance. No. What you want to do is ask the question, why is our business or why are we on our campus doing this particular activity? Because usually people will answer questions. Nobody wants to respond to a declarative sentence for obvious reasons. A declarative sentence makes you very defensive very quickly because you're saying this is what you're doing as opposed to asking the understanding question of what does this mean? How does it work? What does it carry forward? The other point is misfeasance. Doing a lawful act in an unlawful or improper manner that infringes on the rights of others. This also occurs, again, in our marketplace, and it can occur on campus. It can occur in an office of registration. It can occur in posting grades. It can occur in the workplace, where you know someone has signed the document or completed the document that should never have been. Did you have a question? Oh, okay. I thought you were, okay. Where someone has completed a document or filed a document incorrectly. It could even happen with degree plans. There are lots of areas where we can have this kind of what is legally referred to as misfeasance that infringes on someone's opportunity or privileges. And now that we have more students, like I said, in the marketplace, they're asking questions about the legal margins now. It's not only about academic integrity and what's going on here and how misconduct in research, and we've had a lot of misconduct in research. I know that there have been scientists that have posted false data or modified data, and it's done a lot of damage for other researchers that trust that data and try to copy that process to see if in fact the science was correct. And the same thing happens with social science, where people will report, they will take and manage what they report to skew it to what they want to say. So all these elements, in students and as staff and professionals that are in faculty, we can't manage every issue that pop up, but we can be aware of every potential issue so we can subject it to the question and also advise the student to see someone in authority to do something like that. I was looking at the Joe Paterno film a couple of nights ago, because here's a situation that if you haven't seen the film, it really is worth looking at. You have a coach that has done everything in the world for his students, but someone close to him blinded him. That's what the story boils down to. And we now have to be much more alert about everything around us. And you think of someone that has done so much work and did so many wonderful things at a university, that this single incident boiled down to termination and damage of his credibility after 40 years of service. It was more than 40 years of service that he had given. So these types of things are close to us, and we've got to look at them very hard. And they're not easily recognizable, but they're only recognizable when we start asking each other questions and saying, what does this mean and why is this happening? Because until we start doing that, and I'm certain in reflection, and even in the movie, there was an aha moment by Coach Paterno. And all of us have got to look for those aha moments before we get to chaos. With our students, with our peers, it's got to be done. The last one is quite easy. We can recognize when someone is just absolutely not doing what they need to do. period. We know that they are supposed to be taking care of entering record data, and their office is full of papers, but they're seldom at their desk at the computer doing what they have to do. We can recognize that. The question becomes, is that happening because we're understaffed, or is it happening because the person is the first, has an aptitude and don't want to be responsible for what their assignments are, what their tasks are? But these 5 legal points are rapidly invading what we're doing professionally on our campus. And primarily because more and more of what our students are doing in the community is coming into our offices. And we have to take and consider that not only are we talking about academic integrity and research misconduct, but we may be enlarging our umbrella where we have to be sensitive to things that we're being told, and as opposed to saying, well, look, that has nothing to do with me. I want to talk to you about your paper or about your degree plan. So I think now when we hear something and it's critical and that we start hearing those low voices like I heard when I was in the building, and we start asking questions, and we act, and if we don't act, what are we buying for ourselves as potential liability? I think these are the things that we're used to seeing in our roles. And understanding what the outcomes of academic dishonesty can be. And over on the right, I've just got a number of things where this kind of conduct can do serious harm in all these other areas. Misconduct academically can tarnish your reputation. The institution can lose credibility. The institution can also have to forfeit their credential or have their credential under review. Fabrication and falsification of data, just never right. There's no motivation, even in creating a joke, to put something out on our internet or on our e-systems that is a joke that looks like fabrication or falsification. The other thing, and this is what gets a challenge for a lot of professors at universities, also researchers at think tanks sometimes, and that's the conflict of interest, where you're getting either a monetary benefit or you're getting an intellectual benefit of having something published or being acknowledged and some type of reward system. For those of you that read some of the stories about this kind of stuff, it is quite serious. And I think in the last 10 to 15 years, I think we've done a considerable amount of effort, spent a considerable amount of effort to train researchers at research universities and also at undergraduate universities to be careful of this particular area, because it's so easy to go out to dinner or to take a trip with a group and then find yourself having a discussion that you shouldn't be having with someone that says, I need your support, and we can give you a stipend, and once or twice a year you can go to Paris or New York, wherever you want to go, with our assistance. All these set up the framework for conflict of interest. And I think a lot of universities, and I would believe community colleges as well, that they have a criteria of what the gifts are that one can receive or not receive. But the challenge is abiding by that criteria when it hits you in the face. When nobody is watching, can we be ethical is a challenge. And it shouldn't be that difficult to do so. I'm going to digress here. This about knowledge of the fields. I'm a deep woods backpacker. Used to do it a lot. And just a few years ago, my wife would always say, you know, what is the craziness about going into these woods and looking at old stuff? You know, going to these ruins. Because amateur anthropologists, archaeologists, love that stuff, okay? So I was going down to the Amazon, and for whatever reason, I said, darling, I'm going to go down to the Amazon. And she said, well, I'm going to go this time too. And I'm happy. This is good. You know, it's good news. She's never taken one of these trips with me. And all of a sudden she said, well, you know, Ralph goes, he comes back, he's happy, he's excited, he's got his little trinkets and all this little stuff he puts on the shelf and mark and label. So we go down to the Amazon. We had some work to do in Bolivia, so we went to Bolivia and then caught a plane down to a village that kind of reminds you of being in the Old West called Urubamba. And it's at the headwaters of, I believe, the Beni River in Bolivia. So we go down there. We hire this guy, local guy, and he comes with outstanding credentials. He knows the rivers. As it was told to me, he's the guy that the locals, the Indians, call 911 when they want to know which river should they travel, the Tuichi or the Beni, because shifting sand and surfaces in the rivers makes it sometimes difficult to navigate them. So myself and another couple, we get on the little airboat and we're going into the river because I want to go to a village. And we're also going to an eco lodge. And so, for the sake, because the guy is still working, I'll call him Jimmy. So we're rolling along on the river, or just pumping along, you know, going. And then maybe about an hour in the middle of the river, we hit a sandbar. So all of us thrust forward. And I'm looking at Jimmy, and the other couple is looking at me, and I'm thinking, you're the guy supposed to know this river. This is not supposed to be happening. You know, you have knowledge. You have a pedigree. That's what they told us. This is the guy. And I'm stuck in the middle, I think it was the Beni River. So I'm looking on each side and each bank, and of course there's carcasses there of dead animals. So I said, Jimmy, why are there so many dead animals on this riverbank? Because I hadn't looked at it before. He said, piranha. Okay. So I look at the other guy. He looks at me. I say, well, Jimmy, you know, rivers don't have rising tides, right? But I was dreaming. I said, when will the tide rise so the boat will get off the sandbar? Well, he gave me the right answer. Well, it's not. So I said, how do we get off the sandbar? I mean, I'm looking for tools. I mean, poles. So he points in the water, and he said, now, mind you, my wife is with me. The woman I told us this is going to be a safe, wonderful, easy trip into the Amazon jungle. So she is looking at me, and Jimmy is looking at me and the other guy, and he says, well, you've got to get out and push me off the sandbar. Well, there are a couple of questions about pushing somebody off a sandbar in a river. First of all, like I said, it wasn't the Mississippi, and they have sandbars in the Mississippi. We don't know whether the sandbar was 3 feet or 6 feet or 10 feet. Okay? But the Mississippi River doesn't have piranha Okay. So, so we finally sat there, and I lament what I thought about doing it, Jimmy. I just can't speak. But so he, I think it took us about 45 minutes, maybe a little longer, for me to realize I got to get in the river. So then the other guy, and of course by this time my wife was like, we can't walk to shore, Ralph. Yeah, I got that. We don't walk on water, so. So we sit there, I say, Jimmy, thrust it again, thrust it. He thrusts the motor again. So then Jimmy tells me, well, if I keep thrusting the motor, we don't have enough fuel to get back to Renovaca, and we won't have enough fuel to get to the destination. You got to get in the water. Now, this is the worst nightmare, even for someone that loves adventure like I do. You get in the water, you really, the movies, you don't really see piranha coming at you. It's not like it's this little bubbly, you know, that's not the way it works. What works is they're traveling in schools under the water, and then you're snapped up. Because if you could see them coming, guess what? You wouldn't go there. So the long and short story of it all was that my genius guide, the one that was on 911 for the Indians, the local Indians, had got us on a sandbar. I couldn't do what I wanted to do to him because that would have been illegal. So I said, okay, let's cool down. And I talked to Rick, the guy that was in there. I said, Rick, I said, the best thing for us to do is try to make this quick. So let's jump in the water. And we were, again, naive. I thought, water's going to be waist deep. No, it was up to here in the chest, which, if you've ever been in water in a river where the river's moving, trying to get traction to push something, it's very difficult to do. Because you got, it's like time equals velocity times force. All of that's working against you, not for you, because the river is pushing against you, and the force of pushing the boat is working against you because it's in sand. All right, so we get out, and we push it, and we get it off the sandbar, and we continue on with enough fuel to get to San Jose Felipe, which is a little eco camp we wanted to go to because my wife and I had been helping this group out. We wanted to see what it looked like, how it worked out. So here's an example that whenever I talked about getting someone to take us up the river, Jimmy, this guy knows the river. So, knowledge of field. No matter how much knowledge you may have and how good you may be, there can always be a challenge. Lesson learned. So, one of the things that you have to do, and I kind of came up with this shortly after I had this wonderful experience in the Benny River, was that obviously we didn't immediately agree on what could be done. I wanted to thrust, I was looking for poles, but finally reason set in. Because, like I said, if we kept burning up gas, we were going to be stuck in the river because we couldn't get to our destination and we couldn't get back to where we come from. So when you're working, whether it's scientific, technological, you have to have Lister potency, as I call it. When an expert tells you that my expertise is failing you today because you're on this sandbar, you don't burn up all the gas and want to argue and debate. You figure out as quickly as you can how to solve the problem. We knew how to solve the problem minutes after it had happened. But it took us about an hour to realize, We got to get in that water. And there was no way to test for piranha. I mean, if there was a test like, throw a stick and they all come or something like that, there's no litmus test. You get in, they come get you. Yeah, okay. So long and short of it all is, knowing a little or knowing a lot just simply means not knowing everything. And that was our experience. But when we go to meetings, and I've been in a lot of them, as probably you have been also, you want to take and extract the essentials from those meetings that you go to and really go back to your offices, and you want to weigh the merits of what you're hearing and whether or not you should take and ask more questions or seek exploring in depth what exactly are we trying to do here, and know that you can get the details right. The most scariest thing about being in a meeting, know the ethics of efficiency. The first time someone says to you, I've got a shortcut, that is not an ethic of efficiency. You need to know the ethics of efficiency. The ethics of efficiency is that you have coordinated steps that are solving your problem that you can be aware of, even if it costs you a little bit more than you anticipated. Because if the guy's saying, I've got a buddy that can take care of this problem for us, Ralph, and don't worry about it. Well, the moment you start telling me not to worry, I want to examine further. How are you doing this? How are you taking this shortcut? Are you doing something outside the bid rules of our university to solve a problem? Are you using green cement to put into the building where it won't gel correctly and eventually start crumbling and could crumble and the building, given a storm, can come down? Are you, as opposed to tempering the steel at 1,000 degrees to harden it, you're hardening it at 600 degrees to save money on time of hardening to 1,000 degrees. And now we have a balcony in a building that if enough people jump on it, all of them are going to come down. So know the efficiency. Know the ethics of efficiency. And the moment the signal is, I've got a way to do this to make it easy for everybody. When more than one person is in a room, nothing's easy for everybody, because somebody is going to have to compromise somewhere in those discussions. The next slide is about writing. We spend a lot of time in our ethics, and we have a paraphrase program that we run, and we only can do about 40 to 60 people, students at a time, faculty, staff. We talk to people about writing, how to avoid plagiarism, how to paraphrase a statement, how to do these different things. And one of the things we've come up with, and we've come up with a lot more than these 5 items, use concise language. You would think that that's understood, but if you get papers from students sometimes, there's slang, idioms, and they'll say, well, everybody understands this. You say, well, no. Everybody don't understand this. Using the word cool or using the symbol for far is not going to work in this paper. You can't do that. So we talk to students about no slang, no idioms in the paper. One of the things that happened also is we have quite a few international students. And for those of you that work with international students, you know that the date process is usually different. It's not month, date, year. It's usually date, month, year. And so when students write that, a lot of people get confused. In my business world, we almost lost orders when I was in business because I had a staff person where we got an order from I don't know if it was Malaysia or India or someplace, and the local individual that placed the order used their international methodology of doing date, month, year. And we would have been a month off shipping. But what happens with international students on campus, when they get there, they don't automatically adjust to that. A lot of times in our discussions, you have to talk and say, and remind them, in the US, this is what we're doing, month, date, year. The other thing that needs to be looked at is verbal modification. And it's very much like paraphrasing. When you go in and change a document, you need to document what you're doing. You need to have a level of certainty that whatever you're adding to the proposal or to the paper or whatever you're discussing in a group and you're keeping minutes on it, and you take and make modifications on the minutes or recommend modifications to the minutes so that they're accurate, so that if someone comes back and want to say, how did you spend this $1 million and why was this decision made, that you have a clearly documented path of what's going on there. And we need to talk to students about that as well. And always, whenever you're submitting or doing a document, when we talk to our students and even with our staff, our faculty, let someone else review it. Don't be proprietary in what you do. None of us like criticism about what we're writing or what we're putting together. But it's nice to have someone to be constructive and say, this language does not work well. Oral communication. How many of you, in your experiences as professionals, have heard someone say that if someone is talking to you and they're looking left, they're giving you misinformation? This, for a long time, this has been taught, that you can kind of tell when someone's misinforming you, because when you look left, that's an indication you're using the creative side of your brain, okay? And even in law enforcement, this kind of stuff has been talked about. But the truth of the matter is, looking left does not mean that someone is misinforming you. Okay. That someone is misinforming you or giving you misinformation. This study, which I think you can find out there, The Eyes Don't Have It, by C. Watts and R. Wiseman, let you know that when people look right or look left, constructed or imagined events are being left, honesty, and remembered events are what they're finding. The key to understanding whether or not someone, whether you're doing business with them or whether or not you're talking to a student, the key to whether or not you're getting maybe some misinformation is the hands and the speed of the language, the speed of speech. Now, you'd have to read the entire paper to get that, but that's basically what I've tried to capture there. It's gestures. And also the fact that you get these spurts of talk, very quick, interval, hesitation, another spurt, hesitation, another spurt. The critical thinking piece that I have here is really only to show from 1922, when Max Weber, if you're familiar with Max Weber, was doing research and writing, was concerned about chain of command, division of labor, and then we have this transformed over that from 22 to 54. For those of you that are familiar with Peter Drucker, we're looking at clarification of problems. And this is basically what we have to look at ourselves professionally, is that everything that we're doing is transforming. And we cannot petition off the way we want to have our expressions and our jobs manage, or how we manage our jobs. We have to be able to take and understand that we can't petition off, because just like in management from 1922 to 1954, we're going to always see this endless transition of what's going on and get new pieces of information. And we have to take and make adjustments to pull those things together and solve problems as they occur in the here and now. Whenever you're in a situation, a lot of people have asked me that we have to be aware of joint and severally. And joint and severally means that if someone does something, it's kind of like what you see on the, but not kind of like, it is like what you see on some of the television shows. If you're part of a event where someone dies, you also can be held for the crime of killing someone. That's joint and severally. You don't, just because you didn't pull the trigger doesn't mean that you're a scot-free person. Gambler's fallacy. I don't know if you're aware of these two practices. The gambler's fallacy is that we sit down and we think that if you flip a coin 10 times or 20 times, you're going to get the coin to land on the area that you want. It's going to be heads if you want it to be tails. But in reality, the odds of gambler's fallacy is nothing changes. So there's no such thing that if I flip it long enough, I'm going to get what I want. The odds are always 50-50. So if you're getting tails on every flip, you can flip it 100 times and still get tails. The prisoner's dilemma is what you also see a lot on television shows, and it's very true, that the first person that speaks up gets the deal. For those of you that are familiar with the Millennium Tower, this is one of those deals where this multi-billion-dollar building is leaning, and everybody that was involved in it was doing it for the right reasons, but now it's engaged in tremendous number of legal suits. And this is one of those things that I was talking to you about earlier. You really have to examine what you're doing and examine it deeply and very carefully, or you can wind up in something that is very disastrous. And then finally, what you think is relevant, however, what others perceive may have greater relevance. And this is the way we kind of have to look at our world today. Thank you.